I am Radhika, and you are watching Grooving and Giving in Retirement, where we discuss living our best life in retirement or early retirement. Today, I want to talk about giving. I've said in the past there are two parts of this channel, grooving and giving, and then there's the glue that holds it all together, financial freedom. But today we're talking about giving, and I'd like to share with you my $10 story. Previously, I've mentioned that I started a not-for-profit called A Childhood for Children, and today I'd like to tell you the backstory of how it started. And that backstory is my $10 story. In March 2004, a client of mine sent me this very letter along with $10, and he asked me to put it to some good use. The catch? Well, his friends were writing a book called Looking for Goodwill. Here's the book, Looking for Goodwill, documenting goodwill in the U.S. Well, my story was going to be part of this book, along with a whole bunch of other stories. Well, so I struggled with how I was going to really make an impact with $10. You know, you tend to think that $10 is a small amount, and can $10 really make a big difference? That's how I thought anyway. Um,
So I struggled with the $10, but as fate would have it, later that year, my employer decided or selected me to go on a 3-month project to Bangalore,
India.
India.
So I knew what I was going to do with the $10. So I was going to add to the $10 and I was going to buy some gifts for the children. So I told a friend and a colleague who told a friend and a colleague. And the next thing you know, people started donating and an India fund developed on my desk. It was one of those old big pretzel jars. So people started donating to the cause. Now, keep in mind, I only had about 2.5 weeks because my employer had expedited my visa, and people were donating, and I was going shopping to buy things for the children. Actually, my friend Angela took me shopping and really made sure that I was buying practical items for the children. And she taught me a valuable lesson, how to stretch every dollar, a lesson that I value to this very day. Um, so I'm buying up to the very night of my departure. People are giving me money and I'm buying things, taking my things out of the luggage and putting in items for the children. My first weekend in Bangalore, the company I was working with hired a car and a driver, which is very common, to take me to this orphanage in Kangeri, about an hour's drive. So Saturday morning, my first Saturday, the driver arrives promptly at 7 a.m. and we exchange pleasantries in English. So I think, yay, he speaks English. See, now there are only two things I knew about Bangalore before going there. One, it is the Silicon Valley of the East. I heard that over and over again. And two, everybody speaks English. So I thought, great, works for me. So here I am on the Saturday morning in the car with this stranger, and we go on the drive. And an hour later, we have not arrived. Another 30 minutes tick away. And then I noticed the driver stopping and talking to people on the side of the road. And I'm thinking, like, got schedule. So it wasn't until I noticed that people are like randomly pointing in different directions. And I realized, oh, snap, we are lost. So, of course, I start asking the driver a ton of questions. Where are we? How much longer can you call someone? I don't have the patience. So, and to every question I asked in my frantic way, his response was very calm. And he was like, yes, ma'am, no problem, no problem. That's when it dawned on me that he doesn't actually speak a whole lot of English. So, yeah, big problem because I didn't speak the local language. Now, my family knew that I was doing this, but they didn't have all the nitty-gritty details. And besides, they were back here in the US, which at the time was like 10 and a half hours behind Bangalore time. So I started to panic. And then to make it worse, he kept turning off the air conditioner in the car to save fuel. And I was sweating profusely like I was in a hot yoga class. Another nerve-wracking 45 minutes later, we get onto this old, narrow cement bridge. Um, really narrow, no barricades, sewer and garbage underneath, and the stench was unbearable. So I am scared, I'm panicking, I'm nervous, I'm sweating profusely, and now I'm gagging. And then this thought enters my mind. Oh my God, I don't want to die here. Like, I hope that I didn't die. You know, if I die here, nobody's going to know about it. Terrible, terrible spiral out of control thoughts. It was all about me, 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 me. We made it to the other side of the bridge, to this, to the orphanage. It was an area with lush green trees and recently swept dirt pathways, kind of like where you could even see the lines of the broom in the sand, in the dirt. And 250 faces popped up from everywhere. They wanted to hold my hand. They were like following me around. They were so excited, even though I was 3 hours late. I honestly felt like I was some sort of royalty or celebrity. It was crazy, and all I could tell myself was like, don't get emotional, don't cry, don't cry. It was overwhelming. I mean, just even thinking about it, I get chills. It's like, it's truly overwhelming. Um, so I was given a chair to sit on. And by the way, I'm the only one sitting on a chair. Everybody else is sitting cross-legged on the ground. And in that moment, that fear, that panic, that anger, all of that just vanished. And then one by one, each child got up and came up and introduced themselves to me in Kannada, which is the local language in Karnataka, the state where Bangalore is located. And they kissed me on the cheek and like shook my hand. And it was just overwhelming and amazing. And I I didn't know all their names, didn't remember all their names, but my goodness, that love that they showed me that day changed my life forever, for certain, forever. Now, during the 3-month assignment that I was there, I would go back to the orphanage. I spent several weekends with the children. I want to say about six or so. And I would deliver much needed supplies to the children. And sometimes a special treat like a piece of fruit. At the end of the 3 months, my husband John came to India and we were going to do some traveling. So I introduced him to the children. And we knew we wanted to keep helping in some ways. And so the plan we came up with was what was asked of us was to fund the third meal. You see, when money was tight, sometimes the children would only get 2 meals. So we would be funding the third meal. So, with the help of my Indian colleagues and my friend KK, we came up with a plan of how to help the kids. I would send KK the money, KK would go shopping, and then he would take all the supplies to the children, and he'd go out and personally deliver the supplies himself, like food, like rice and dal and oil and, all the staples. So now, if the story had ended there, I would be so pleased with what I did with the $10. And by the way, I think that that's the story that went into the book because when I came back from Bangalore, I sent my story, well, several months later, I sent my story um, to my to my friend Jim, who had given me the $10, who passed it on to the writers, and the book had already gone to the publisher. So it's kind of actually my stories in the epilogue of the book. It's not actually in the main section of the book. Um, and honestly, if the story had ended there, I would have been so grateful to everybody who made this possible. But when I would tell people my $10 journey, they would want to be a part of it. So years later, I started telling people about what we were doing with this orphanage in India, and they would be like, "Hey, how can I help?" And so people would give me money. And at some point, we were living in Amsterdam. I was working and living in Amsterdam. And, people would give me money and whatever money they had. So sometimes people would give me like pounds or euros or dollars. And I was like, oh, geez, I'm managing all these different currencies. But it felt like a second India fund developed. In fact, that's what happened. Second India fund developed. And that's when I knew. I knew that I had to find a way to stretch my $10 story. The paraphrased words of Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world, became my guiding mantra. Everybody can talk a good game, right? But it's like, what are you going to do about it? Like, show up, right? So in 2012, 8 years after my first visit, I started A Childhood for Children, a volunteer based grassroots not for profit whose mission is to fulfill the basic needs of underserved and impoverished children, and where 100% of your contributions we receive benefit the children. Let me say that again. 100% of the contributions we receive benefit the children. How? Because I put my money where my mouth was. I started the organization. I put my money into the organization, kind of like, when people do like a startup. I know this is a not for profit, but you got to put your own money into it. You got to put your money where your mouth is. So I did. And fortunately for me, I was working for a different employer, and this employer matched dollar for dollar money you contributed into a not for profit. So I thought, great, I'm going to put money in, my employer will match it, and we're going to go do great things. I didn't really think anybody would be interested. But the story continues and the plot thickens. Stay tuned for part two of Giving in Retirement. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. This is Grooving and Giving in Retirement.